Nana, why are we covering all the mirrors? I was only 6 years old when my aunt, my mom's younger sister, died in a car accident. Nana's house had always been the focal point for all of our gatherings, the heart of the family, and she was preparing it for the wake. I followed closely behind her, like her tiny shadow. "To protect our souls, little Ciara," my grandma said, stretching her petite arms as far as they could reach and tossing a pale blue sheet over an ornate standing mirror tucked into the corner of the large foyer. "And to keep my poor Aisling's spirit from being trapped." "Auntie Aisling isn't in heaven?" I was always quick to cry, and tears blurred my vision at the thought of my late aunt not being in heaven. "Astiorin," Nana crooned the endearment and cradled my cheeks with her strong hands. "Auntie Aisling's soul is trying to get to heaven. We just need to help her along a bit." She released me and continued on to the next room. I sniffed loudly and dragged my sleeve across my face, toddling after her into her bedroom. I had been just a baby when Granddad had died, and this was my first real experience with death and loss. "But why does covering the mirrors help her soul?" I pressed, curious. I watched as my diminutive grandma climbed onto a chair, bracing herself against the vanity table in front of her. The dark walnut wood creaked even from the weight of her slight frame. "Because, Astiorin, at the time of death, the veil between the living world and the spirit world is very thin. Mirrors reflect the soul, Ciara, and in this delicate time they can trap the souls of the living and the dead." My eyes were huge as I stared up at her. "Quit gawking and hand me that sheet." Nana motioned for the folded sheet off to my right. I picked up the flowered sheet with a new reverence, running my small fingers over the embroidered edges. I was helping to protect our souls. I solemnly lifted the sheet to my grandma, watching raptly as she draped the fabric over the vanity mirror. She gripped the back of the chair with white knuckles as she gingerly stepped down from her perch. Even though I was only 6 years old, Nana was so small that I already reached her shoulders. Looking down at me with stern, thoughtful blue eyes, she placed her hands on my shoulders. "Don't go peeking under those sheets now. You got it?" she asked. I shook my head rapidly, whipping my curls back and forth in the front of my face. She went on, voice dropping almost to a whisper. "If you stare into a mirror for too long while the spirits are roaming, you're likely as not to see the devil over your shoulder." "I don't want to see the devil," I exclaimed, bouncing on my feet and eager to leave the room with the mirror and the devil hidden behind the sheet. Nana hugged me to her chest. I could feel her voice rumble against my ear as it was pressed into her chest. "That's why we've protected our souls. We're safe now." My grandma had some peculiar beliefs she carried over from her time growing up in rural Ireland. Her own mom had died in childbirth, so she was raised by her grandma before meeting my grandpa and traveling to the United States. She taught me about the fae, curses, fairy trees, bull-on stones, and I absorbed it with undivided fascination and sincerity. My parents both worked full-time jobs, so much of my upbringing was done by my grandma. We would spend mornings searching for witch stones in the woods and afternoons baking soda bread and butter cookies until the whole house smelled like a bakery. She showed me how to knit and how to curse, and I cherished every instant. I loved my Nana dearly, and even as I grew older and some of that childish wonder fell away, I continued to honor her teachings and superstitions out of respect and fondness. I was 14 years old when Nana fell ill. I watched as, already a thin woman, she slowly began to wilt and wither. We took fewer walks through the woods, baked fewer treats, took more moments of rest. But for all that she was shrinking before my very eyes, my grandma's wits remained sharp and her humor undiminished. The doctors gave her 3 months with such an aggressive cancer. She lasted a year. When it came time, when she was sleeping more than she was awake, Nana chose to stay at her home, the heart of the family. My mom and I rearranged the furniture in her bedroom so we could maneuver her wheelchair more easily through the house. The wardrobe was pushed into the corner, The nightstand was replaced with a much smaller tray, and the vanity was dragged to the spare bedroom down the hall. One day, near the end, I was sitting by Nana's bedside, reading a novel to her while she dozed off and on. She placed a frail hand over mine. "The mirrors, Ciara," she murmured. "Yes, Nana," I said softly, swallowing thickly over my sudden tears. It wouldn't be too long now. "I'll cover the mirrors." "Now!" For a moment her voice was strong and her grip crushed my fingers, grinding the bones together. Then her hand laxed and her tone softened. "Do it now, Astiorin." I swiped my fingertips beneath my eyes to brush away tears. "Yes, I'll do it right now." I gathered a stack of sheets from the cedar chest at the foot of the bed, inhaling the scent of the wood and laundry detergent. I looked up from the pile at my grandma. She looked so small in her bed. Air rattled in her lungs with each shaky breath, but her blue eyes were open and regarding me with the same love and intensity I'd known all my life. I gave a watery smile and told her I'd be right back. My mom found me crying in the spare room, standing on a chair in front of the vanity to reach the top of the mirror. Even though I was 15, she cradled me like I was a little girl until my sobs were only hiccups. We finished covering the bathroom mirrors together in the pretty framed mirror in the foyer. Nana died a few days later. My parents told me she passed peacefully in her sleep, but I could only think about her spirit trapped in the void, restless and wandering. I wondered if heaven was real. I wondered if her soul could find it. The veil between worlds was gossamer and fragile. Would she meet the devil? The wake was a balm for my aching heart. There were so many people who loved my grandma, who shared stories of her humor and kindness, who genuinely ached at her loss from this earth. The house felt warm and alive, and for a moment I was able to focus on my grandma as I had known her best, picking through rocks with me, or covered in flour with her hair frizzly and wild. I stood in the foyer as my mom was bidding farewell to the last of the mourners. It was late, well past sundown, and we'd been on our feet all day. I picked at the edge of the cloth covering the frame mirror, pulling at a loose thread. "Hey, Mom?" I asked as she closed the front door. "Whatever happened to that antique standing mirror?" I gestured towards the corner where the mirror used to stand. I remembered my grandma used to do a quick turn in the mirror before leaving through the front door. She would twirl, then pat her hair futilely. "Ah well, can't be helped," she'd say with a laugh and a shrug, winking at me. "Oh, my mom looked frazzled, and she shoved a graying red curl from in front of her eyes. I followed behind as she walked towards the living room. "I think we moved it to the hall closet where we retiled the floor last year. Could you help me carry these to the car?" Her arms were full of flowers. I collected as many floral arrangements as I could carry and helped load up our car. The flowers filled the compact back seat, and 2 large orchids were buckled into the passenger seat. The amalgamation of scents was overwhelming, heady and thick. My mom shut the last of the car doors and walked over to me, gently brushing my hair from my face. "Thank you for all your help today, little Ciara." She pulled me into a fierce hug. I squeezed her tightly in return, my voice muffled by her shirt. "You're welcome. I need to drop these flowers off at the church, and then I'm going to pick up your dad. Are you okay to wait here for me?" She pulled away and smiled at me. I nodded. I stood on the front porch as she drove away, red taillights glimmering and disappearing in the distance. Walking back into the house, I was greeted by the covered frame mirror, and I recalled my mom mentioning the standing mirror being in a closet. I hadn't checked any closets when I had shielded the mirrors several days ago. Nana's insistence nagged at the back of my mind, and I made my way down to the hall to the bedroom to grab another sheet. I held the folded cloth in my hand, gazing at the delicate embroidery and missing my grandma so much that it hurt. Walking through the dim hall, her voice rippled through my mind, the echo of a memory. "To protect our souls, little Ciara." I opened the hall closet and was greeted by a figure staring back at me. I jumped and let out a shriek before realizing I had been startled by my own reflection. I cradled the sheet against my chest with one hand and the other pressed against my mouth, suppressing a nervous giggle. My own wide eyes and giggling face reflected back at me. Feeling silly, I spun on one foot in front of the mirror and combed my fingers through my hair, mimicking my Nana in years past. "Can't be helped," I exclaimed, shrugging my shoulders. I did another twirl for good measure. Something seemed strange about my image turning with me, but I couldn't quite determine what had triggered the vague sense of unease. I unfolded the sheet in my arms and stretched onto my tiptoes as I arranged the fabric on top of the large antique. My hands smoothed over the surface, removing imagined wrinkles. The closet was dark, and the only feeble light from the hallway provided any visibility. I stared at the pale cotton draped over the tall mirror. Had my reflection been turning the wrong way? I had turned clockwise, so my reflection should have been moving counterclockwise. I frowned. I thought about seeing the devil over my shoulder and turned my head back to look behind me. But of course, there was only the empty hall. I faced back towards the closet and froze. Where the pale sheet had been bare, there was now a dark shadow in the center. The shadow seemed to darken as I watched, melding and forming a silhouette behind the fabric, as though the mirror were illuminating and projecting a form across the back of the sheet. I ached to wrench the covering and gaze at the glass and the figure beneath it. My fingers practically itched with yearning and my hands trembled at my side. Was Nana's soul trapped? Would I find her horrified eyes and wide mouth soundlessly screaming into the void? At the time of death, the veil between the living world and the spirit world is very thin. Slowly, so very slowly that I hardly noticed, the silhouette beneath the sheet began to take a physical shape. What was once a flat projection became three-dimensional. The sheet steadily raised and bumped and grew until it became a human shape, standing, draped in the cloth. There was the arch of a nose, and where a mouth should be, the fabric was sucked in, as though the figure had inhaled sharply with lips parted. I knew, down to my very core, that the thing in front of me was not my Nana. Mirrors reflect the soul, Ciara, and in this delicate time they can trap the souls of the living and the dead. But could they release them? Finding my courage, and with a shuddering breath, I slammed the closet door on the entity and sprinted down the hall. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the driveway, eyes glued to the house behind me and waiting for the spirit to follow. I panted and hugged my arms around my shaking body. Was it a spirit? Had I found the devil, not over my shoulder but standing in front of me? I couldn't stop thinking about the shadow taking a corporeal form, and the pale, dirty feet I had spotted underneath the sheet.